Good morning, good morning. So, how are we all today? I want to say it's the beginning of the week, but it's Tuesday, isn't it? Tuesday. Right, over on the Norfolk County Council Democrat Service channel, we have a Children's, Families and Community Select Committee. I'm not sure if I've actually sat and watched one of these ones before. So let's find out what it's about. They are running about, what was it, 17 minutes behind by the looks of it. But then if it started at 10, it didn't really, did it? Maybe they just turned on their there we go. Right, let's see how this goes. No sound.
YouTube channel.
Here we go.
A fire alarm test is not expected during the meeting, but if the alarm does sound, we must evacuate County Hall, and in the event of emergency, make your way to the nearest exit and meet on the muster point located in the main car park. Under the Council's protocol on use of media equipment at meetings to be held in public, this meeting may be filmed, recorded and photographed. Anyone wishing to do so must inform me and ensure that it is done in a way that is clearly visible to everyone present. The wishes of any individual not to be recorded or filmed have to be appropriately respected. Starting the meeting proper, I'd like to welcome Cheryl Nicklin, who's our new parent governor representative. And it's your first meeting, so welcome. Moving on to the agenda proper, we've got apologies of absence. Nikki, if you outline those.
Thank you. Apologies from Councillor David Bills, Chris Allen and Councillor David Sayers, who is substituted by Councillor Brian Watkins.
Thank you, and thank you to those substituting. Oh, Tim.
Sorry, just to come in and apologise. I might have to duck out a little bit early to get to a meeting. Thank you.
We'll see how we do for you, Tim, all right? Next, I refer you to item 2, which is the minutes of the meeting last on the page 4 of our agenda pack. I think when we agreed those minutes, we were agreeing the minutes for the 16th of January, but I think they inadvertently still stated the 14th of November, which was our previous meeting. So with the note of that slight amendment, are we all happy to agree those minutes? Those present, thank you. Any members with any interest to declare on the items as presented? Maxine? Sorry, Councillor Webb.
Oh, that's all right. Call me Maxine. That's absolutely fine.
Very informal first thing in the morning. Yeah, sorry.
No problem. Just that I have a child who attends a state-funded special school. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. No particular updates from myself as chair, only to remind members that after we finish this meeting, we're heading in next door and looking at the task and finish group, which myself and Mike have been working behind the scenes to get sorted and set up, and we'll have a word about that.
A cat Jinx.
Straight after this.
That's my stepdaughter's cat.
Item 5, we did have a public question for the agenda, which is from a lady called Jenny Williams, and she's not with us to actually ask the question, so the question as presented and the response should be circulated out to members in the room and will be included with the minutes after when they get produced. Okay, I don't have any local member questions, and that moves us on to item 7, which is the main reason for today's meeting, which is the Department for Education High Needs Capacity announcement and the considerations that Norfolk County Council will have and in formulating a response to them. Can I ask Penny Carpenter as portfolio holder to outline her report and then I'll come to James and Nikki following that. Thank you. Penny, please.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman, and excuse my tiredness for being late. I got locked out of a room where all my belongings were and the door jammed, so hence I'm a little bit rushed. So, good morning. It's always helped to be locked out of a room. Anyway,
At least you weren't locked in it.
we have been delivering a major programme of change to deliver amongst many areas of children's and educational settings for children who require additional support within those environments. We have, as you would expect, kept a very keen eye on government and that of the Department of Education, which would enable us to deliver our scheme in Norfolk since we submitted our application in 2023. With a change of government in 2024, and any government would do it, they would halt everything. But we're very pleased that that's no longer the case. I must say our children's services have not been complacent. And in fact, we have all written, including myself and the chairman here, to the Department of Education, and those communications were followed by numerous telephone conversations. And we were not alone with this, but other local authorities were lobbying hard as well for a decision. In the interim, we have transported more children around the county, which enables those children to stay in education. In December 2025, the Department of Education announced that they would be investing $3 billion in high needs capital funding over the next 4 years. They also confirmed after a number of calls to clarify the position would support the 2 free SEND schools for Norfolk. However, within that communication, we received 2 options. One is to proceed with them as originally planned, or accept a funding settlement to realise the same numbers of places by alternative means. Again, the team communicated with the department to drill down basically if we built the 2 schools, we needed the monies to cover 2026 prices rather than 2023, as costs have clearly risen. The paper sets out the details of the options and the evidence to support the decision, which we do need to confirm with options, or the option we will take no later than the 27th of February 2026. You will find at point 4.1 to 4.22 the detailed evidence of where we are today with journeys our children undertake now, detailed, and really does hit the reader. These are really as crystal clear as to the direction we should be taking. And at point 4.5, you will find the cost of the build. There are 3 recommendations stroke actions to the committee to consider. And I must say, we are in this position today because of our staff in children's services, our senior officers have not let this drop, as you would expect them to be that hard with the Department of Education to get something done. So I will now hand you over to James. If you wish, Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Carpenter. I'll just add a few thoughts, I guess, by way of a bit of a recap of how we got here, and sort of just clarifying the sort of core elements of the decision that's facing us as now, and some of the context around it. I mean, I think we're all well aware as a committee that there's a substantial challenge around SEND, both in Norfolk and nationally, rising need. We've been committed in Norfolk to investing in all parts of that system simultaneously over a number of years, so critically around mainstream inclusion, wrapping teams around schools, ensuring schools themselves have enough money and resource to meet the greatest possible level of need. But we've also been clear from the outset that we did need more specialist provision in Norfolk, and therefore have set out to create that. And that started with the council's investment of 120 million capital back quite a few years ago now, and we've already travelled a good level of distance, as the paper describes, in creating new special schools and new specialist resource bases, but we still have further to go. That programme is not yet complete, and there are still more provisions to come on stream. And critically, we want the provision to be high quality within the Norfolk system, and therefore able to be sort of controlled and assured through Norfolk's lens, and as close to home as possible for children. So another reason for creating provision that's in Norfolk of our own is to try to minimise sort of travel distances as part of it. So that's all part of the vision. Following on from that initial sort of Norfolk investment, more recently, working with the previous central government, we struck a safety valve deal to secure additional resources, and as part of that, we secured plans for the 2 new special schools that are in question here today. That was all agreed and actually progressed to detailed planning to the point where we had secured partnerships with 2 trusts to deliver and sponsor those 2 new special schools, and those were to be DFE funded as part of that particular deal. However, as time went on, we had a change of national government, a new government coming in wanting to review the system and all of the resources in play, and as a result of that, Norfolk schemes, and indeed all schemes nationally of a similar, which were at a sort of similar stage, if you like, of development, were all paused, and we've been waiting for quite a period of time for news. And if I'm honest, towards the back end of last calendar year, we were starting to get to the assumption that the answer was just going to be no, these schemes are never going to happen because the delay had been so substantial. However, the government now has come through with a new proposition, which we hadn't anticipated, where actually it was either it wasn't just no, nor was it just yes. It was 2 options. It was yes, we can go ahead with the 2 schemes as previously profiled, or you could take an amount of cash funding. And as it was described, it was meant to be funding to create equivalent places in a different way. But it is worth clarifying that. I know it's in the paper, but it's just worth clarifying what that actually means. So in money terms, the amount of money that was made available to take as that option is substantially less money than the amount of money it would take to build the 2 new special schools as originally profiled. Their idea of equivalence, we think, comes from this idea that actually if you spend that amount of money to create more like specialist resource-based type places, and all of them were minor capital works to refurbish existing buildings rather than building a unit from scratch, you might, with a lot of luck, get somewhere close to be able to produce the same number of places. So it is an option, and therefore, you know, there could be an argument that actually you'd want to consider that. So we actually think it was interesting to get those 2 choices, and interesting of government to give those 2 different ways forward. We've therefore thought it was right and proper to take a bit of time thinking about that, and whether there was one to recommend. We've also, as you perhaps would expect, done a bit of engagement with families in the SEN community. We've also spoken to Schools Forum and leaders. We've also engaged the 2 trusts who originally were due to sponsor the schools and reconfirmed that they were supportive of going forward. And they've put that then together as a sort of pack of information for Cabinet ultimately to decide and for you to sort of digest today. On the back of all of that engagement and all of that analysis work, our view is that the 2 special schools as originally profiled is the better way forward for Norfolk, but it was definitely worth taking that time to ask that question and reassure ourselves. We think the sufficiency need is still very much there. The demand for places has continued to rise, and although some things have changed, for example, independent sector schools have been created or announced, indeed in the 2 areas of Norfolk we're talking about here, which does, you know, that wasn't true when we first made the plan. Although that has changed, we still think the business case for these 2 schools does stack up and is the right thing for Norfolk, and so that has been the dialogue we've come to. I don't know that Penny's already made public statements with a sort of minded to view of that, but I think it's right and proper that we go through all the stages and test out that thinking. So that, I think, is where we're up to today. We're obviously doing all of that in the context of awaiting national reforms, and I think the last thing I wanted to say is that although we are still very much of the view that these 2 special schools are the right way forward and extra places are required in the Norfolk system, it is still the case that our overall goal is to support mainstream inclusion to the greatest possible extent, and that actually once these 2 schools exist, and assuming that is the decision, and the specialist resource bases are all completed, that should be, in our view of sufficiency, enough for Norfolk. And from that point, we would want to get to the place where, over time, hopefully the reforms and the investment in the mainstream sector can support a greater level of need in that community. So it isn't our view that actually we would want to fund 5 more special schools if we could. Actually, in theory, these 2 with the specialist resource bases would then give Norfolk quite a rich portfolio of provision, which would meet a good level of need. And our view is certainly the officer base is that actually we need to be then focusing on mainstream inclusion. I'll stop there. I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, James. I'm sure that members of the committee have got many questions. I've seen lots of hands going up already. First one that caught my eye was Tim, and then Mike, and then Maxine, then John. I better write all these down. Do I forget them? Tim first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for the two introductions to this a very important item. The alternative offer just doesn't seem to achieve the same level of provision to me, and appears to be a poor compromise. So, you know, I can't speak. It doesn't seem to me like we can be seriously considering it as the option we go for, given the 2024 analysis found there was a strong evidence base for new specialist schools. What risks are there resulting from no such provision being made? And I think we can all say that, you know, we've got to grab this with both hands. This is an opportunity we can't afford to miss, certainly. If funds were diverted to mainstream settings, what guarantees are there that capital money, because of course it's capital, it's not revenue, will lead to the specialist staff and permanent infrastructure needed, rather than just, I think as you called it, a sort of refurbishment of existing school provision? Thank you.
James?
Okay, so taking the first part about sort of risks, I mean, in some ways they're not risks, they're issues, in that the delay we've had in these two schools from when we originally profiled them to be has had a material impact on the ground for lots and lots of children who we might have been hoping by now would be on their way to those provisions as they're opening. And so what you're seeing at the moment is that all of the specialist provision that exists, even though it has expanded in the way the paper describes in Norfolk quite substantially, is all full. So all the maintained special schools are full and are actually in some cases over capacity. We've actually reached the point now where almost all the independent sector placements that we'd had originally hoped perhaps to reduce our reliance on are also full. And in some ways, when tribunals are making decisions, they're almost having to go further and further afield to secure anything. And obviously in the mix of all of that, you've got children waiting for provision for longer periods of time, or in some cases in out of education, or in, being home tutored in various different ways while waiting for the specialist provision to come through. So it isn't really risks, it is issues that have actually occurred. On the bit about mainstream, so I think to be clear, what I guess I'm advocating for is not just capital. So in this scenario, we could have put some capital monies into the mainstream sector to do refurbishments, to create specialist resource bases attached to the mainstream sector. And if we'd done that, we would have had to have also provided with revenue funding to support that as an SRB from the high needs block. But with that would be again equivalent to the money that was going in revenue sides. Here for the special schools all comes from the same pot ultimately. But what I'm advocating for is an investment in revenue funding into mainstream education on a sustained basis, one way or another, whether that's just basic school funding, of which the school can choose to spend on SEND, or whether it's some kind of ring-fenced pot, then that's the thing that I think, it's not by no means the only thing, but one of the things that would most enable the system to be maximally inclusive would be if we simply could give them more resource. And at the moment, the pattern, because the level of demand is such, and ultimately the tribunal usually then ends up directing a specialist placement because we can't provide in the mainstream sector, that sucks all the extra money into the specialist end of the system. And so actually, as a country, we are spending billions more on SEND than we ever were. If you do track the total spend in the country on SEND, it's up by billions and billions of pounds. But almost all of that has gone into the specialist end. And actually, a mainstream school is probably less financially well off today than it was 10 years ago. And we've got to find a way to re-engineer that and get the money flowing back downstream.
Always about the money.
I've got Mike next, please.
Always
Thanks,
about the money.
Brian. James, thank you. It was a really succinct overview for a particularly complex situation. And I'd also like to say thank you to you, Penny, and those that have lobbied for this situation. And I think alongside that, I will mention great appreciation for Terry Jeremy MP, that also worked tirelessly in order for that to take place and to get to this position. And I know he copied you in, Penny, and he also copied Sarah, and it shows what can be achieved with that constant lobbying. I think what we see is a genuine strategy that has impact. Specialist schools are needed, we know that, but further down the line there also needs to be that integrated approach with funding that ensures that young people with specific needs are supported, not just one-off, but continually. And that's not just through our school system, from primary through to secondary, but then that transition period for them to move into further education. And that wider approach is something that I know everyone in this committee care about and want to see progress. My question, apart from that statement, is with the government's recent announcement that 90% of the debts of English councils will be paid off, and I think that's equating to 5 billion for this particular issue, would it be possible, not immediately, but in the future, for us to have an update of how this impacts on our provision and our strategies moving forward? Thank you.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
Thanks,
5
Councillor. Really
billion.
helpful. Thanks for the supportive words and statements there. Obviously, on the forward work plan for this committee, we have an item to come on SCND at the appropriate point, and we're looking to connect that to the reforms. And what we, as you described there, we are starting to hear from government almost on a weekly basis some part of the jigsaw.
I find it incredible. The money that they are taught. I'm guessing these schools are going to be done under, what is it, PFI, the same as the hospitals, which means that we're going to be paying 3 times the amount for it. That is probably going to take 30, 40 years to pay off. I also see in Holt, they're trying to close a village school down, and it's like, why aren't they investing more in teachers? If we've already got the buildings out there, is that the wrong approach, do you think? Do we need to invest more in teachers? Do we need to invest more in education for these teachers of things like ADHD, you know, all what comes under the SEN? I mean, they're still going on about buildings. I'm really not quite sure if I think that's the.
So you've highlighted the news that just came yesterday. On top of my inbox for once, around the deficit.
What do you
yes,
reckon?
just to confirm, what we heard
Tell me in
yesterday is the
chat.
government have confirmed
Let me know
they
your
will
thoughts. Let me know your
effectively
feelings.
underwrite 90% of the accrued deficits up to this financial year, on the assumption that we submit a plan to deliver the reform programme, which hasn't yet been announced. So I'm assuming we will try to do that, and hopefully the plan will be well received. It's worth also clarifying that because
I mean, they're clearly not in a rush if they've been doing this for the last 2 or 3 years.
Actually already count towards our 10% of that. So actually we made in the
Or is it just about
term, that does
crossing the T's and dotting the I's before they
reduce
put a
the
brick down?
immediate risk to the county council's finances from the cumulative deficit that existed. However, lots of caveats there. That just deals with the deficit. That doesn't put any money to spend on anything. That just deals with the black hole in the finances in the background. It's sort of the first part of a jigsaw.
Money, money, money.
It's also not clear what's going to happen. So there's 2 more financial years before we get to the point when the DfE have said they will fund this. So what this does is get us back to zero for this year that's about to end. If we actually continue at the current rate, Norfolk will accumulate around about 200 million more deficit in the remaining 2 years, and that
Money, money,
how
money.
that will be dealt with by government is not yet clear. So that we could still find ourselves in a position where there's
Where is our money going?
a reasonably substantial local problem. We haven't heard anything necessarily, therefore, from government yet that enables exciting new action. But I guess I'm hoping, given the scale of what seems to be happening, that the reform programme will come with some of those announcements. As well as the funding for these 2 schools, we are anticipating a further amount of capital funding at some point in this April high needs block capital. We don't know how much and we don't know particularly what for, but we are expecting that. And as I say, I'm hoping that the reform programme, when it comes, will come with investments of various types, particularly around mainstream. One of the things that's really interesting is what the role of NCC will be in that. So because with government taking on the deficit themselves, will they want to direct spend from Whitehall in a different sort of way, or will it just be an amount of money for Norfolk County Council in the way that it currently works to work with Schools Forum to determine?
Kind of getting the
All that
gist
might be
that
unclear
still
to me, so
nobody
I can't really give you an
knows.
exciting answer around what is currently unlocked at the moment. The news yesterday was more
So
about
these
getting us back
kids
to zero.
are still going to just be
But I guess
rolling in the
I'm very
background.
encouraged that it's being dealt with as a national problem, that things are happening at some scale, and we seem to be moving away from, you know, a world where the financial problem was the goal, to almost trying to get the finances set to a sort of sensible level, which then can hopefully allow us to focus on meeting need and as I say, get the funding flowing in the right direction. But my worry is, if all the money has gone on dealing with the deficit as it currently stands, is there enough money left in central government to fund that additionality we need in mainstream?
Why can't that just be written off?
I've not heard any numbers in that space yet.
Like the O2 building in London back in,
Thank you.
was it 1999, 2000? 400,
Thank
400
you,
million
Chair,
written
and
off.
thank you for the report and so on. And I'm also grateful for the lobbying that you've done, and that you actually, it's in here actually that you even put a message out to families on social media and asked for their responses, and that we're absolutely clear that the schools are needed. So I'm not even going to talk about the other option, because I don't think there's any question that the two schools are.
So parents are
needed,
asking
and
for
that's the way that it
schools.
needs to go. Obviously, the whole question around supporting mainstream and extra provision and funding and so on is absolutely crucial to everything. So, but in terms of this decision, yeah, we have to have the two new schools, don't we? I just want to, in the paper, look at the figures at the end, where you're talking about the demand that there is currently, and it says that there are 1,410 consultations live in the system. So presumably that's the number of children that are waiting for a specialist place. That's what it basically means. Is that's right? Is it?
Not necessarily so, Maxine, in technical terms. The requirement on the local authority is where a parent makes a request for a particular school to be named in their EHCP. There's a duty on the local authority to consult that school and take their views into consideration in order to make a decision, and there's legislative exemptions that apply to that. So what this graph is showing is the current number of live consultations in the system. That doesn't necessarily mean that those children are waiting for a place. It means that the parent has made a request for the place, but there might be then a determination made as to other options that could be suitable for that child elsewhere in the system, such as through the SRB programme, such as with the enhanced specialist provisions that we've created within the mainstream school system. So it's a nuanced point, but it is an important one, and I wouldn't want to mislead councillors here today that this is a group of children who are waiting for a special school place. It's where the consultation is being undertaken. That was the position in November last year.
Okay, thank you. Can I carry on?
So can I just interject then? If that's the case, what sort of percentage usually ends up needing a place, and what sort of percentage?
So yes, within that graph, kind of in the historic years, you can kind of see a rough trend, and it usually accumulates to around 60% of any, give or take, any group of children referred in a given year or for consultation will then receive a place in a specialist provision.
Thank you. Come back to you, Maxine, please.
Thank you. So that's so 60%. I can't do that quite quickly, but it's what 900 maybe. I don't know, something. So that's still a lot of children what the school, I think we're going to end up at the two new schools. Is it 270 or that figure? So we're still a long way off what we actually need in terms of specialist placements there. And I'm going to talk about. So what that means is that these are going to, with the system as it is now,
Oh, Maxine,
we'll
go
look
on.
at more tribunals and appeals and all of that. We know that's going to happen. We can see the way that
costs money.
the trajectory is in that. And I want to talk about, you know, we've had the local first inclusion plan and the programme of change that you've been doing. And 2 years ago, when I was looking at tribunal figures, the projection was that they were going to reduce. The words were that the council was seeking a significant reduction to the number of tribunals due to investment in dedicated tribunal resource and the wider local first inclusion programme. But since then, we've actually spending, in money terms, we're spending 5 times the amount. We're now spending £1.5 million per year on tribunal costs, and I've got the figure.
Bloody hell.
So that's how much we're spending on, the council is spending to,
And that's tribunals
in legal
just for
costs
schooling.
to fight the appeals
What
that
about tribunals for
families are making.
healthcare?
And that's gone up 5 times from the amount that was projected.
Wow.
Or that just seems to say that something's gone disastrously wrong in the forecast and the projection and where and how the figures have gone. And it really worries me that we are just putting more and more money, throwing more and more money at solicitors and barristers to fight cases which we know, you know, statistically 98% are going
Lawyers
in favour
and
of the family.
insurances are always the
And
two.
we aren't doing anything
always make
different.
money, aren't they?
There doesn't seem to be any
I'm in the wrong
kind
job.
of difference in the way that we're operating and working with families to try and bring those figures down. This demand is still going up, even with all the work that you're doing. And I just wonder if anyone else on the committee is as concerned as I am that figure that we're spending, that was supposed to be £300,000, is now £1.5 million, and no one seems to be worried about it.
Seems to be bothered because it's not
It's
their
not
money.
really part of the item that we're
And it's
looking
not
at
their
today. I
family.
mean,
It
the
is.
extra provision can only help the
tribunal.
situation that people would get their first choice and not have to appeal because there is better provision across the county. And I do get where you're coming from, and it's an issue that you have, you know, raised before, and it has, you know, progressively the amount of money spent on it has increased. But you know, I do have to focus in on the agenda in hand. You know, we're looking at improving the resource, you know, facility that we have, and whether that's better directed at 2 new schools or you know, extra SRBs within existing locations. But if I come to you, James.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as I say, it's slightly beyond the scope, but I'm happy to try to answer. It's a really important point and a really, really complicated scenario from my point of view. So I'll try and answer sort of as clearly as I can in good faith. It's the vast majority of those tribunals exist because the places don't exist. So there are simply more children who want a place than there are places. So that's not totally true. There are other scenarios in the mix of it, but that's the vast majority of it. And that ultimately is all a stem of whether the macro plan on inclusion is working. And I have to accept that so far, despite everything that we've done in Norfolk, investing in funding for schools, in teams wrapped around schools, in special resource bases, the fundamental level of referrals per year for special school places hasn't decreased, and we did hope it would. When we set out on this journey some years ago, we haven't turned that curve. The reasons for that are myriad and complex. It's happening in almost every bit of the country, not just Norfolk. And I do think it comes back to my fundamental point of actually, despite everyone's best efforts, we haven't really supported mainstream inclusion at a national level in a way that would ultimately make that difference. And so all of that demand that ends up as a tribunal would be reduced if actually the mainstream sector was supported and resourced in a way that it currently isn't to meet a greater volume of need. So I am extremely worried about it, but I am doing lots about it. So I would argue strongly that our changes to support mainstream schools, the team around the school meetings, the zone inclusion partnerships, the school and community teams, our work on speech and language therapy, our work on neurodiversity, all of it is aimed at reducing the number of families reaching the point where they think a specialist school is the only way forward. And I do still strongly believe, and we hear this feedback very strongly from special school leaders, that a proportion of children going to special school could have been met in mainstream inclusion. There are some children, of course, who absolutely specialists are always going to be the right thing, but there is a clear consensus in the profession that there's a proportion of children who are going through that tribunal process to the specialist schools who didn't need to be there, but unfortunately the mainstream sector is not resourced or in some cases empowered or having the right culture to enable that inclusion. And there are more and more children every single year in specialist settings. There's vastly more getting a special school place than ever before. And so I would strongly suggest that it may not seem as if we're doing anything about it in the sense of having a specialist tribunal team. We are doing some of that work in the background, but everything we're doing across the whole programme is ultimately aimed at reducing that level of demand, which should, in theory, reduce the level of tribunals. But I think it's been clear for a while that without the national reform, the problem is bigger than any local authority can fully resolve. And that's why you're seeing the same trend in every single authority area in the country of despite everybody's best efforts locally and everyone's ambitious and lots of great work going on, the fundamental level of demand just goes up and the places can't be created fast enough to accommodate them. And we've got to reverse that. I hope that's helpful, but Nick, you might want to add some more detail on the specifics around how the tribunal works and the relationship work there.
Yeah, just to pick up, I guess, on a level of detail that perhaps isn't captured in the high-level figures appended to this paper. I think one of the other critical factors in respect of some of the challenges that there are in the tribunal system is how the breakdown of the numbers reflects the age range of children. So we have particular bottlenecks at transition when children enter into school, at their transition from infant to junior, and again at their transition from primary to secondary. So echoing James's point around the availability of places against the overall number of children, that's particularly acute because you find spikes in particular year groups, and of course within the existing special school estate, the availability of places will be dispersed across a wider variety of year groups rather than kind of bottlenecked into a single one. Now, I think there is more that we need to do in respect of enabling the system of education settings to work proactively together to support transition effectively for children, because what we essentially see with that bottlenecking is a sense that a child has been very well supported in their existing setting, but a perception that support is not going to be replicated in their onward setting. And so therefore it's a projection forward rather than anything necessarily built on evidence. And I think that's an additional aspect to the reforms that we would want to see strengthened, is the relationships and partnerships around transition and enabling a greater sense of confidence to be built that when children do transition on to a new setting, that the funding will follow them, that the resource will follow them, and that the infrastructure and support will follow them as well. So I just wanted to add that additionality just for the context.
Thanks, Nikki. And just for bring this back to the agenda and what we're looking at today. Your professional opinion that both of the options, whether it be it extra within mainstream school or the building of the new schools, will only have a positive benefit on the scenario, because it's given those choices and options that when it comes to those bottlenecks,
it's only going to look good for a
to
little
look
while
at,
until it doesn't work.
what could be best and available.
What can we
The fact
guarantee that
is we
it'll
will have
work?
a better array available because there'll be more.
Teachers.
There'll be 2 more special schools in Norfolk.
We need more fabulous
Is that
teachers.
fair? Maxine, did you want to come back on the answer that you were provided with?
Thank you. And I'm well aware of all those difficulties and so on. What I'm trying to also get to is the fact that the forecast and what you said you hoped would happen has just not happened, and it concerns me that we've got to put in another plan to get this 90% funding coming next, and presumably that's going to be similar to the plan that you've already put for, you're already establishing, that you established through the safety valve, local first inclusion and so on, and that is going to bring the outcome that you want, that we all want. But the plan that has been in operation doesn't seem to have achieved that. I'm not saying that there isn't good work being done. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the overall outcome is that we still have huge demand, and more than that is that we aren't working differently with families so that it doesn't get to this point, and so that, you know, why can't we be resourcing support in a way rather than spending the money on solicitors? Why aren't we supporting families and
Agree.
resolving the issues that they have rather than just
Ca-
giving the
Councillor-
money to a
Councillor
solicitor to do
Webb,
it?
Councillor Webb, I think that's something that when we get further detail from government about, you know, what they, you know, what's going to evolve,
What, in
we
6
need
months,
to look
12
at
months'
that.
time?
But we have had
2 years'
assurance
time?
that on what we're looking at today, either a new school or the extra injection of money into mainstream schools will only help the situation. So but hold
That's
that
what we
thought,
want,
because we can always
isn't it?
look at that in a
Help the
future meeting.
situation,
I've got
Brian.
quite a lot of names down on my list now. I've got 2 Johns, one of which is John W. But you're next, John Ward, please, Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd just like to ask, the 270 new places at the schools, where will those children come from? Will they come from existing schools, or are they currently being taught at home, a lot of them? And also, will this enable us to not have anybody going out of county in future, please?
Thank you for the question. I mean, ultimately, the children will be identified from a wide variety of circumstances, a few of which you touched on there. What will be absolute priority for us for both of the schools is to prioritise and target children local to the area. That's, you know, the ambition for us, that we want children to attend their most local school. And that will be our starting point, looking at children for Yarmouth in that immediate area, and similarly for Downham Market. Now, there could be a host of circumstances behind those children and their circumstances. Some of them indeed will be in mainstream school. I mentioned the transition points and moving on from one setting to another, so could be leaving primary and entering into the school, going into secondary. It could very well be that some children have more challenging circumstances and have found themselves outside of the education system for whatever reason that might be. And additionally, the other aspect that we want to look at quite carefully and in some level of dialogue with existing special schools and families are children who are already travelling. So the paper sets out some of the detail of children living in the local area and where they're currently attending a school, not local. And we want to be proactively enter into some dialogue with those schools that they are attending, with those families, in a way that's, very collegiate, isn't something that's going to be directed or insisted upon by the local authority, but very much to open the conversations about the opportunity to attend a school more local, which obviously can only bring significant benefits to those children, because rather than spending, significant amounts of time travelling in a taxi, we want them to have that time actually spent enjoying being out in their local communities, being with friends, and achieving what they can. So, yes, so in summary, it's a lot of different circumstances in terms of the children's backgrounds, but central to it will be looking at local children to the schools.
John, you want to come back?
Yes, you said it would give the families the opportunity to go to the school. Will we insist, where there's a long journey, perhaps the parents say they still want their child to go to the original school, will we insist on them moving?
We can present the options and the opportunities to those families. I mean, ultimately, as mentioned, answering responding to Councillor Webb's question, there is a statutory process that underpins that the local authorities must follow if they're looking to change the name of a school that's named in a child's EHCP. There is a right of appeal against that. And we wouldn't want to be in a scenario where we were inadvertently bringing kind of additional, adversary into the system in order to achieve it. But we're hopeful and confident that actually with some of the right dialogue and discussion, that actually that will just happen naturally. And I'll just...
I just need to interject here. you know, with how algorithms work. We all understand how algorithms work, yeah. And I'm coming across a lot of these Instagram posts, and what I am seeing, not just so much in this country, but it seems to be quite further afield when it comes to classroom designs. It's been noted, it's been discussed that, you know, the noise, the distraction, the intensity of having 30 kids plus in a classroom with maybe 1 or 2 teachers, let alone however support teachers work nowadays, to parents with SEND children homeschooling them. And there's this new thing that's been out the last kind of week or two about, you know, the council is going to come in and check to make sure that the home is appropriate for homeschooling. It's not too loud, it's not too busy, and it's caused a bit of a ruckus on social media. And I have looked at some of these. So if we just click off here, are you following me? Yes, you are following me. I'm not quite sure about sound, but let's have a listen.
And places are all in who you share them with, and it's life and the point
Of a classroom isn't no longer, you know, the 1960s, 1970s. There was one that I came across that I thought was brilliant, and I thought I saved her post, but I haven't. Crazy. But if you go on Instagram, you can find them, you can look for them, you'll see them. That'll change your algorithms, I'm sure, and they are more inspiring, these classrooms. They've got sofas, they've got like floor cushions, they've got lovely seats, so it allows the kids to move around the classroom and engage better than just having to sit at a chair for the whole lesson at a wooden table and being spoken to. There's more interaction within these classrooms, and I think our government are missing a trick with a lot of our schools that are already there. I really do. I might be on another planet, let me know, but I really think we need to look at classrooms.
To give one key example, when we opened Bure Park Specialist Academy in Yarmouth, there were 18 families who voluntarily asked and, you know, wanted their children to move from a less local school to attend that particular school in the local area. So there is a track record behind this of us doing it in partnership with families, you know, where we've not needed to go down the routes of insisting and achieve some really good outcomes there. And we want to follow suit with that approach.
So I've got quite a list still. I'll just give you a little resume so we know where we are. Daniel, you're next. Then John Fisher, Ed, Brian W. Make sure I've written Brian down just so you know who I meant. And our new parent governor, Cyril, as well, is on my list. So first off, Daniel, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Before I go down the line of questioning, I will say I'm not necessarily opposed to the recommendation, but I'm going to play devil's advocate for a little bit. I just want to dwell on 4.14 to 4.16, which is, in 4.14, you say essentially there may be a case for using the existing school estate due to falling pupil rolls. In 4.15, you go on to say that would be contingent on alignment with the county-wide sufficiency needs analysis. And then in 4.16, you go on to talk about the difficulties of completing an assessment of that needs analysis within timescales. Could you give us a sense on what would actually be required to carry out that assessment? And were that assessment to be carried out, do you think it would there is a chance it could materially change your recommendation or materially change the home to school transport budget?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, there are kind of several aligned processes and exploring the relative viability of particular sites, particularly when they're reuse sites where those buildings haven't been initially constructed from the perspective of being a special school, you know, which brings additional considerations. The Department for Education publishes its particular requirements, the Building Bulletin 104, that's as distinct from the mainstream specification that the Department for Education use as well. So there are capital considerations in terms of determining the suitability of a particular existing building and space against those specifications published by the DFE, but also based on professional knowledge, understanding and judgment as to, you know, the environment at hand and how effectively it lends itself to a provision for children, you know, with really some really significant and complex needs. And that can be variable as well, depending on the nature of special educational need that one is discussing. Typically, what we've found, and we have had examples of building reuse in the past, in Norfolk, and you know where that's aligned with our overall sufficiency plan, and there's a good solid business case behind it. We have progressed, but what I would express is that the reuse of buildings typically, you know, comes from a particular quarter of our estate. In terms of the falling roles scenario, these are generally more rurally sparse, smaller primary schools. You know, that are where there may be concerns in terms of their viability. And they're generally Victorian in construction as well. And myself, having visited several of them in my time and have walked around, I can immediately see difficulties and problems with actually the environmental setup for children with, you know, conditions such as autism, who, you know, have challenges around sensory processing needs, and you know, some of the cacophonous kind of Victorian sort of setups in buildings. And actually, when you get into the detail of it, in order to bring that building up to scratch, you're then looking at quite considerable adjustments to the building fabric in what's already quite an expensive building anyway. And you start asking the natural
It's an expensive
question,
building.
you know,
It's already built. It's probably already
flattening the
stood there for
building and
100
starting
years.
from scratch, and you know, and building up because we are looking at state-of-the-art facilities based on modern specifications. So that's one aspect to it. The other key consideration is the school organisation requirements. As mentioned, the two new schools have all of that kind of banked with two multi-academy trusts established. But a standalone school will come with, if it's in a multi-academy trust, will come with complexities in terms of that existing trust, whether they would be willing to utilise it for that purpose. Indeed, it could very well be that in school organisation terms, one can't establish it as a special school without going through a further free school application. Because it's a closure of it, essentially a closure of an existing mainstream school and a reopening of a special school. So there is a statutory process in and around all of that, public consultations. And then if establishing a new school from scratch, that opens up.
And we wonder why things take so long.
Selection process. So
Yeah,
essentially you sort of lose the time that you think that you might have created by seeing, you know, a vacated school building, and that's why it can look quite compelling. But there are technical additions.
Okay, just think, if a child was due to go to school in 2021 and for, you know, young entry level of what is it nowadays? Is it 5 years old when you start school? Say that happened in 2021. And by the end of 2021, you, the school, and everybody realised that that child wasn't coping, wasn't appropriate to be there for that child's needs within its SEND situation. To them then to go through the 2022 stuff that they went through, 2023 consultations and everything else, 24 passed, 25 passed, we're now in 2026. That child, say 5, would be now 10 years old, and therefore that child might not be still in school. So where is that education for that now 10-year-old? And the way they are now talking, this could take another 5 years, which means that child could then be 15, and therefore that child would have had no input, educational meeting of well, let's just hope it's going to be homeschooled. Let's just hope the child is going to be homeschooled. But then we're kind of hoping that there's going to be funding there for that child to be homeschooled and to get out and about for the needs of that child, and education and experience. And just imagine from 2022 to now, how many tribunals would that family had to have gone through? I mean, is it a case of every year you're having to refight because of the September entry for the new year of each year? Does that mean that a family has to go through that every single time, every single year? And is that why we've seen an increase of £1.5 million being spent just in tribunals? I find it absolutely bonkers.
Additional considerations that actually erode the available time that you might otherwise save. So those are some of the key considerations, Councillor Elmer, but I can see
James wants to come in as well.
Well, I guess I feel like, forgive me, Nikki, long story short, I think our view would be that the quickest way to have 2 schools open to their doors to children would be to continue with the 2 existing schemes. And even if there were a building that came free in the short term that appeared to be relatively suitable for a special school, it will still require some work, and as Nikki has just described, the whole process would start from scratch, so actually you wouldn't get children through the door any quicker. So I think we genuinely think if you want 2 schools, because the stage we're up to already, with all that groundwork completed with sponsors, etc., that would be the quickest route to get them to be actually open.
Okay.
I'll keep
Daniel,
going,
come
Chair. That was really thorough in terms of the assessments that need to be done. But could I push for an answer on, do you think if you, let's say you've managed to do all that, do you think there is a chance it would actually have changed your recommendation, and would going down the SRB route rather than the 2 new schools route significantly change the transport budget? So I think those were 2 specific questions. I think another broader point I would just make, in the context of just looking at special needs sufficiency, you're completely right, but the council has other policy goals. Having vibrant local communities is one of those. Finding appropriate uses for school buildings that might otherwise close is quite an important part of that.
Okay, so a couple of bits there. So I think one of the things that there's a slight danger here that we have a sort of view of between 2 special schools or some SRBs. To be really clear, Norfolk is building an enormous number of SRBs anyway, and the amount of money that we would have got out of this, because most of the SRBs are requiring quite substantial.
What abbreviation is SRB? What does that mean?
To our portfolio of SRBs we're doing anyway, and we're still standing behind the programme as it already exists. So I don't see it in that way of it being sort of either or vision in some ways. We're having our cake and eating it here by having special schools and still delivering the full SRB programme that we think Norfolk needs. On that latter point about the reuse of the estate, which has obviously come up sort of in a number of different forums, we are open to that possibility, that where it does make sense to reuse school buildings for a particular purpose, and that may continue. Indeed, there's 1 or 2 examples where we're looking at that. But the key point is it has to be in a way that makes sense of our sufficiency plan. And the challenge is that, as Nikki's described, a lot of the buildings that exist, including the ones that might come free, are just not at all.
Okay, just quickly, I have just found because I thought this is going to bother me, SRBs. I need to know the abbreviations a little bit better. So this is it. This is what I have found. Council schools with special resource bases, SRBs, provide additional support for children and young people with special educational needs within the mainstream schools. SRB offers tailored support to children who may struggle with accessing mainstream education, allowing them to attend up to 100% of their mainstream lessons. Different types of SRBs exist, including those for autism, which provide a structured environment with visual support strategies. Okay, I thought they were going to give us more. Info about that. I've just clicked onto that link. Let's take you over to this page. Which one is it? I think it's this one. Yes. This is a Norfolk County Council special. Oh, let's just get rid of that. Specialist resource base. So, specialist resource base, SRBs, provide children and young people with the extra support they need within a mainstream school. Children and young people do not need to have an education, health and care plan to attend a base. Support can happen in 3 ways. Permanent placement at a SHIP, another abbreviation for something, SHIP, autism or deaf base. Temporary sessional placement at a base while attending homeschool for up to 4 terms, depending on need. Outreach in school support to a child at their mainstream school. This may include support for staff at the mainstream school too. Good, I would expect that. All children and young people attend all type of bases will have individual learning plans. They are supported in specialist class and will attend mainstream classes in varying amounts of time alongside whole school activities where appropriate. So basically, they're going to allow the child to dip in and out, depending on their needs, which is good. I like that. If a child is attending a temporary sessional base, a plan will be agreed to support their return to the home school. Not quite sure of that particular one. There are regular communication with parents, carers. Parents, carers are closely involved in planning and reviewing their child's learning and all bases. Follow the school's process for parents' evening reports, etc. Parents, carers are also invited in for the events. Bases are part of mainstream schools across the country. There are different type of bases. Okay, I shall save that link. I will put that in, if it allows me to. I shall pop that in down here. So anybody that wants to be in the replay crew can look back on that and click it and find out the information that is there. In the meantime, let's carry on with where we're up to with the meeting. Now we know what was it? SRBs. Now we know what SRBs are.
All suitable. They are very old Victorian buildings that would be in the last thing you would consider trying to reuse for a special.
So what, you want to sell these buildings to knock down? Or?
The other problem is that what we really want, beyond the special schools we're talking about today, is SRBs connected to mainstream schools rather than buildings by themselves in a village.
They just want to build new buildings, don't they?
We do potentially want some more capital facilities, but what we want is ones that are on the site or possibly just around the corner of an existing mainstream school to support that inclusion. So trying to turn a disused school in a village that's sadly no longer got the people to support it into an SRB type model doesn't really work because it's not connected to the mainstream schools. So although we have this,
Why? But you can
we
make
want
it
more
work.
provision, we want
We've
more
got the
SRB
buildings.
places. There's some free buildings. We could repurpose them. And there's a lot of logic to that. When you actually get to it, the buildings are usually in the wrong place or of the wrong type, and they're not connected to still viable mainstream settings. And that's what we really need most of, beyond the special schools we're talking about building today. And so that's why it's often not going to be a plan that works out in the way that it might make sense, sort of, when you see it initially.
I think if the more bases that you put out there, the more
Coming
bases.
back again, Daniel.
I'll make it the last time.
You've
Chair.
Indulgent I am today.
Find out.
I'm going to push for an answer on the home to school transport point, which is if we didn't do the 2 new schools but looked at the alternatives, is it likely that would make a significant difference in the home to school transport? And then my other point, and this is my last one, is just going back to your intro where you implied that you would envisage these as being the last 2 special schools we build. Then going on to your later points where you acknowledge, and I think we all acknowledge, that fundamentally something is wrong with the system nationally, and too many children that could be supported in mainstream settings are ending up in special schools. These aren't going to be the last 2 because we will end up building another one after this if the system doesn't change. But if it does change, are we going to end up with some empty schools at the end of it because a significant number will go back into the mainstream schooling in the future, and we have falling school rolls across Norfolk?
Okay, so I'll pick up the second question. I might let you do the first bit about home school transport. So I think you're exactly right to describe it in that way. If nothing changes, if the reforms that come through are relatively insubstantial, or the level of resource that goes into the mainstream sector doesn't change, but also resource into things like NHS services around neurodiversity and speech and language therapy, there's a whole package of things that needs to happen in I think, my mind and lots of people's minds. If none of that really happens, or it's relatively watered down, you're exactly right to say that the trend will probably continue. There will still be a reliance on specialist provision growing and growing. At the moment, we've still got a very large cohort going to the independent sector, and at some point, therefore, the decision may be made to build even more special schools. It's interesting to see how that works, because obviously once the DfE take this on and they're responsible for the deficits, it may be that the DfE needs to fund that and reaches its own conclusion, because they're the ones sort of writing the checks in a different sort of scenario. But I don't think that's the right vision for children. I think genuinely, going back, even in my experience in local government, the proportion of children in mainstream sector was much higher when I started out working in children's services 20 years ago, and I think we can get back there, and we should aim to get back there, and therefore we should be looking to achieve, hopefully backed by the reforms, a gradual decline in usage of specialist sector. But the independent sector in Norfolk is, I forget how many children it is today, Nicky, around about 1,000 children. So actually, to get back to the point where any of the maintained special schools that we're building here were not needed, you'd have to completely eliminate that 1,000 children's worth of need, and that's what we'd hope to see happen. So I think it's extremely unlikely we'd ever get to the place in the foreseeable future where these special schools wouldn't be full. The thing that might happen is the independent sector, which is currently in addition to all of the special schools that we control, so that would hopefully decrease. So I think I'm not worried about these schools not being full at some future point. I think that's a very, very unlikely scenario, unless we're talking 100 years into the future.
I'll just come in and add some more, actually, and it segues nicely into the transport question. And James will know that for a long time, really, what I've been idolising for is a scenario where we have some surplus in terms of our placement availability across our specialist estates, and that comes in the context which James already mentioned of significant number, if not practically all of our maintained academy special schools being over-subscribed and over-committed by some considerable number to what they should actually be facilitating and accommodating. But the question of surplus is really important when it comes to strategic place planning of individual children, because one of the difficulties and challenges in the system, and this relates, I think, possibly also to the earlier point made by Councillor Webb and my discussions about bottlenecks, etc., we are having to place children essentially where a kind of place becomes free, wherever that might be. And it may not mean that that is the child's most local school. But where you're able to be in a system where you're operating with a degree of surplus, you can look at a broader range of options around individual children, and you can do that in a strategic way where you've got, you know, a group of children or a number of children all seeking places, and rather than just kind of going, oh, here's a place that's the, you know, the most swiftly available one, you're then able to look across, okay, there's some surplus here, there's some surplus here. Where do the children actually live in relationship to that, and strategically place plan in a way that, you know, I would like to be in a stronger position to be able to do it at this current time. And that leads then, I guess, simply onto the kind of original question that Councillor Elmer was pushing on in terms of these two schools and impact for home to school transport. Both have been strategically commissioned for the locations that they are, essentially for you know, for home to school transport as a key consideration. And I would have confidence in saying that the realisation of those places in a different way, through a different means, would have no additional benefit on home to school transport for those children, principally because in Yarmouth, the pressure for the places is in Yarmouth, and the paper sets out, you know, how children are already moving outside of their local area. Land and accommodation in Yarmouth is at a premium, and it was difficulty actually, you know, securing the site, you know, and had to use an existing set of school land to achieve that. And then similarly in Downham Market, there's a key relationship to the aligned schools for children with this particular profile of special educational need. The aligned schools are located in Norwich and in Fakenham. So there is again a strategic set of planning here that we've got children you know, travelling from the west of the county into Norwich, which is a slightly less kind of populous area. I don't think that could achieve better economics, if you like, in respect of where children are travelling from and its relationship to the existing estate of special schools.
I suppose if we started from a fresh sheet of paper and we put the, you know, the special schools, you know, equidistant from each other, that align perfectly.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not playing the Sims game, though, are we?
Minimise the travel as much as possible. I think we
Otherwise,
have to
that'd be
trade
perfect,
between
wouldn't it?
the cost factor of it, but actually what's best for the children. Because, you know, I mean, as someone who spends over an hour each day when I come over to County Hall from the west, you know, as a youngster, I'd be, are we nearly there yet? By the time I got to, you know, Swaffham, you know, and we don't want that. You know, it's not good time for the children to just be sat in the back of taxis or minibuses or whatever, being transported around.
The money without building the two schools, and these are quite easy answers. You don't need to go into a lot of detail, but presumably that would impact. And also, presumably, if the demand is still there, then those places would be filled by independent school or the provision from independents, and hence that would increase our costs proportionately. Because the other question is paragraph 4.8 and 4.9, where we're talking about self-delivery.
What is going on with
that
their
be
channel?
a preferred option, or would that be a preferred option, and that we should be considering?
That's it. Well done.
Just on the first question, very
succinctly, what
succinctly,
happened there on there?
John,
That was definitely their end.
Yes, is the answer to both. Is the answer to both of those. There would be a corresponding detrimental impact in terms of the alternatives for those children moving into the independent sector, and equally in terms of the alternative cash settlement, as I said, and kind of James picked up with Councillor Elmer's question. It's not a case that Norfolk is doing, this isn't an either or. It's not, you know, use the money differently to do some SRBs or the special schools, because we are investing into both. And that's what brings
Investing.
you know, the efficiencies and outcomes, you know, the efficiencies and outcomes for these particular options on the table. So very succinctly on that, and then James.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the sort of self-delivery point that you made, I think then that is our preferred option. I think Norfolk has a good track record of delivering these major capital schemes. We've got, you know, a lot of provision onto the ground successfully, and so I think we are pursuing that with government, and they've indicated positively that they are up for that conversation. So it's not an agreed position with government, but actually I think that's something we'll let's go over the line quite quickly now. Which again is just us trying to get to the doors opening as fast as possible.
Okay, thanks, John. I've got Ed next, please. Councillor Maxfield.
Thank you, Brian. Just quickly to sort of go back to Maxine's point, I think we can probably cover that with the local first inclusion update when we get to that. And I was thinking about it. We're always certainly, well, I'm always chomping at the bit for data on these things, but I do wonder whether actually some pen portraits of what the people who are part of the new teams around early years, and I guess especially around transitions, as you were talking about that, Nikki, just to get a sense, a picture of what those teams are actually doing, what their day job involves in terms of engaging with parents in particular, so that we can see where the work is going. That was one thing. The other thing, I mean, I know you're keen to skip on, and I'm not even sure I've got a question at the end of this, Brian, so I would just say that just to sort of note my disappointment, really, because I was quite excited when I heard that there were these two options coming along, because it seems to me over the years we have, and when I say we, I don't specifically mean Norfolk County Council, but the whole system really, we seem to have moved further and further and further away from the Warnock principles by sticking plasters onto bits of the system that are broken. And the more, others have made this point, I guess, that the more special schools we build, the more capacity we're creating for people to send their kids to special schools when it feels instinctively as though it would be better for them to be into mainstream. And I just think it's a shame that this is, you know, that they didn't even flip the maths on this and say, actually, we're going to give you more money than you need to put these kids into mainstream settings, rather than trying to save some cash by saying, well, you can do it cheaper if you put them into mainstream. That was it. As I say, I'm not sure there's a question at the end of it, just a slight sense of disappointment that the government didn't be that imaginative in the way that they approached it.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose just on that then, I suppose, so A, to reinforce the point that we in Norfolk are still building lots of specialist resource bases funded in our own way, as described in the paper. It is also the case that we receive an additional amount of high needs block capital funding in this spring, and hopefully every spring that follows thereafter. So in terms of, yes, this particular offer as an alternative to these two schools did look to us to seem to be slightly strange the way it was framed and the small amount available. But if more funding comes down from that route this year and in future years, that might unlock an ability to invest. And I think our direction would be that should be in either special resource bases or even actually just in works to mainstream schools to make them more inclusive. It isn't always about even a unit that's sort of semi-attached. Actually, if we can spend money on the mainstream education setup, capital works, and make all the buildings as good as they possibly could be to meet that wider need, then that's the direction of travel we want to go down. Again, we are already doing some of that in Norfolk, but if the government comes through, so just to be clear, this isn't the only capital money the government is talking about. There is more waves to come, we think.
Okay. Councillor Watkins, Brian, next, please.
Thank you, Chair, and it's very good to be here this morning for this very important discussion. I would just like to again express my gratitude for the hard work that's been put in by officers for this major project, and I applaud the work that you've put in. Certainly listening to my colleagues around the chamber this morning. There have been lots of good questions and points made, so there would appear to be, I think, a consensus around the building of the 2 new schools. I think it's important to grab that opportunity with both hands. It's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. I'm convinced that proceeding with the building of the 2 new schools is the right way forward. I think after the 2 years of delay that we've had, we must choose the option that guarantees deliverability and not theoretical capacity. I think we all agree that it's not acceptable or sustainable for children to have to travel long distances or to be placed in high-cost accommodation because of lack of local capacity. So I think the arguments are compelling. We have the sponsors in place, and they have said again that, that they
sponsors
go ahead. The community partnerships have been formed. Local people seem to be foursquare behind the proposals for the 2 new schools. And I think now, if we were to pull the rug on it, I think the reputational damage for the council would be great. So I very much support.
Oh, you don't care about your reputations,
with
honestly.
the building of the 2 new schools. There were a couple of questions. Again, like Councillor Elmer, just on the basis of playing devil's advocate, perhaps, on deliverability. Can the officers confirm the realistic timescale differences that would entail between building the new schools or pursuing the cash alternative? That's the first question. The second question is, if the build didn't proceed for any particular reason, what is the total, or what would be the estimated value of costs that would need to be written off? I think I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Watkins. I must admit, I was thinking, generally thus far there's been support from those that have spoken for 2 new schools. And I think one thing we need to focus on, and I was going to mention it in my sort of summing up at the end, but I think you've raised a point, and that is about the deliverability. If we say, yes, the schools option is where we want to go, how can we influence getting those schools delivered quicker rather than later? Because you perceive that putting an SRB into an existing school would be quicker than building something new. But if you're going to build something new, which I think is where the consensus sits, how quickly can that be done? And, is there delivery partners, that will help us to achieve expeditious delivery of those new schools? Have we got contractors chomping at the bit waiting to do the work, or are they being delivered via a central government contract that takes 10 years to procure, a bit like a hospital? So I'm sort of adding that on to the other Brian's points and questions, if I could, please, James.
So it's just, Nicky might want to come in. Is it tricky to answer your questions in really definitive terms on either front? So if we'd taken the cash alternative, then yes, in broad terms, the creation of a specialist resource base compared to building a special school is a shorter time frame, but it's not a short time frame. So again, the same thing has to be true. You have to agree your concept, agree who your cohort would be, but go out to the sector, having specified that, seek bids from schools or academy trusts to sponsor such a thing, and then there's a sort of relatively convoluted process of registration. So it is not a, just do up the spare classroom that exists on the side of it and open it a couple of terms' time. So the SRB timeframe is also still quite extended. So, and that would all start from scratch, blank piece of paper, whereas obviously the special schools have gone a long way down that journey. So I can't give you a really sort of absolutely definitive time frame X, because the blank piece of paper one doesn't exist. But I don't think actually it would be dramatically quicker to build SRBs with the cash alternative than it would be to do the 2 special schools. On the latter question, again, you know, we're now working with the DFE. So assuming the decision is to support going ahead with the two, which feels like the consensus of the room today and matches Penny's view, we will then confirm that decision to the DFE. We will try to get over the line with them the idea of self-delivery, and only at that point probably could we absolutely nail down for certain what the new opening date would be. But to your question of, is there a track record? Yes, there is. So I think, you know, our team is experienced at doing this in terms of the self-delivery option. We have the team, the capital team in place to deliver that. The sponsoring schools are there. The governing bodies and trustees of those schools are lined up. You know, you still got to go through various stages, and I wouldn't want to sort of downplay the complexity of that. But I do think, you know, the team, including the actual building firms, we have those relationships, and we've done it enough times over now to know how to make that happen. So I'd have a sort of strong degree of confidence. At the risk of opening a can of worms, I suppose things like local government reorganisation.
So it's PFI. PFI
works. It would be part of my job to try and make sure that in any scenario of that, it didn't derail things like this.
Just to answer the question on the cost element, that there's obviously a degree of investment already taking place in Great Yarmouth with regards to the access road, which has gone through previous approvals. So my view on a ballpark estimate in terms of if the new schools weren't opted for and the writing off of costs and investment already made, I would estimate that would be in the region to 1.5 to 2 million of investment that's already been made in getting to this point for both of those schools.
I think that further concentrates our
Crazy, and
minds.
they're not even been built yet.
So I've got Cyril next, please. Thank you.
Hello. I may not have a question. It's just sort of comments of what I've heard.
Absolutely, no problem.
So apologies for that. Build them is my first comment. Having taught in special schools, there is such a wide range of special schools. You know, we've talked about complex needs. So that's one end. Then you've got SEMH, SEBD at the other end. And then you've got the autistic bit that clips into every bit of it. So I think the whole thing is build them. And the other thing, which I think you, Councillor Long, said was, what's best for the children? That, I think, from this select committee, should be our uppermost thought. What is best for the children of Norfolk? Is it SRBs? And forgive me, I've never worked in an SRB. I worked in a behaviour and learning school in Kent prior to retiring back to my Norfolk roots. But they won't cover everything that a special school will do. They will cover a small percentage and will only take a small percentage of school. Yes, if it is right for the child, let them stay at the mainstream school and the SRB. I think that would work. With regard to the tribunals, again, you know, as a parent governor and sitting on governing panels, hearing, right, we've got a certain number of people coming in who've got special needs. They haven't got EHCPs, but we've got to try and meet their needs. It's about funding those needs as well. And I know it is very difficult. But when it comes with an EHCP, with the school on, the school then, as I've seen, can you meet those needs? Yes, no. But if the parents are driving the force there, and I feel sorry for you having to do those. So that is my underlying thing. What other recommendations? Yeah, 270 places. You know, 170 in Yarmouth and 100 in Downham. So yes, the transport will still exist because you will still going to have some to get the children to those places. It is good if they can go, you know, walk to school or get the bus to school, or the parents take them, rather than sitting in transport. And in terms of transport, it depends on the child. It might be you have one taxi for one child because of their needs, whereas you can use a minibus with 4 or 5 with somebody in it as well. So it's all of those that need looking at. But the more
Yeah.
special schools you've got, the better for the needs of the children of Norfolk.
Why didn't all these academy
Sorry,
schools,
no
when they
real question.
when they were built and took
No,
over,
but thanks very
why
much for
didn't
your
they
input,
take
and
this
that
into account?
sort of professional background is very helpful to us as a committee, so welcome.
Yeah.
And thank you for that. The only other person I've got left on my list is Maxine, who I caught just partway through. I forget where we were, but you wanted to come in and I caught you in the periphery. So
Thank you, I appreciate it. You've just got a couple of comments and just one other little question. In terms of home to school transport, I mean, Councillor Ward talked earlier about insisting on certain schools to families, and I just want to point out the fact that no parent wants their child to travel long distances to school. It's not because they want that to happen. So if they are have a preference for a certain school, all those things will be taken into account, and it's because that is the school that is going to best meet that child's needs. And I have my son, I live in Norwich, and my son travels to North Norfolk to go to school. That's not my choice, that's not what I want, but that was the closest school that can meet his needs, and that's not ideal, but that's best for him. And so, you know, in a system that isn't perfect. So I just want to make that clear. It's not parental choice that wants their children to travel long distances. Just going back to mainstream school and James's comment about, 20 years ago, and there were more children sort of included in mainstream, and I absolutely recognise that. And we had a very different sort of curriculum. The system was different. And we've moved on. We've moved away so far. We've got SATs. Ofsted is different. It's a very much more rigid system now with the curriculum, and so in a way, I feel like however much the support that and funding that needs to go into mainstream, in my view, needs to be coupled with a completely different approach and different focus in the curriculum. But I don't know that we're going to get that. So it's a bit of a concern going forward. But I absolutely would love to see a more inclusive mainstream system. And in some ways, we've talked a lot about SRBs, and I do wonder sometimes whether SRBs are kind of more segregation than inclusion, really. I mean, just because they're on the same school site, and I know that that's controversial. I can see your eyebrows.
It still comes down to the
That's
child.
just that's
thing,
a question, because having kids in one different building on the same site, how inclusive is that? And I know there's lots of good work going on, but it's just something to
classrooms
that occurs to not just me. I know. And just so the question was kind of around staffing, really, for the new schools, because obviously we've got a limited amount of teachers and teaching assistants and so on, especially with the specialism required. And I just wonder if there is kind of like any plan, or I know that's not necessarily under your control, but what might be happening there for when the schools do come on board. And obviously we don't want experienced teachers moving from one school to another and creating that sort of problem. Thanks.
Then train more.
And James may want to
bring bursaries
further,
back for
but I
teachers.
think one of the significant positives and really a boon for Norfolk here in respect of that workforce element of the new schools are the two multi-academy trusts that have been appointed in Unity Schools Partnership and Eastern Learning Alliance. Both have a substantial track record in special school operations, and their workforce development plan, their leadership capacity, their plans for how they would support recruitment and retention was thoroughly and rigorously tested by the Department for Education and Norfolk County Council Children's Services as part of the sponsor selection process. Both are incredibly strong. They've already started to identify staff within their trust who are looking for opportunities to develop in terms of their career profile. Obviously, there is both are a mixed multi-academy trust, so they operate mainstream schools alongside special schools, and that brings its own, positives and opportunities in terms of cross-pollination, opportunities for secondment. And both are new into our special school estate in Norfolk as well. So they bring additional expertise into the wider network for Norfolk as well, to add capacity in terms of upskilling staff in existing special schools, in SRBs and in mainstream. So I feel very confident about that, alongside the work that we're doing as Norfolk County Council in terms of workforce development, specifically in SEND. And you know, we've led some system development work with the sector in and around that. And of course, we've just had the announcement also from national government as to investment into workforce development and training. So I feel really confident about the calibre and the opportunities for the new schools in terms of staffing.
And just,
yeah,
I feel like I can't leave the SRB sort of
James,
comment
you've got something else to say.
unaddressed. So I guess I've got, so Councillor, you're absolutely right, first and sales, on mainstream inclusion, this all needs to come together as a package. I would say that at the moment, things are being tried in all of the areas I'd want them to be tried. The proof will be, of the pudding will be in the eating. So that, government is doing a programme of national training around SEND, which is really positive. I haven't seen much detail, but it sounds positive. They're trying to bring the NHS more on board. They are reforming Ofsted in its approach. They are trying through the curriculum review to support inclusion. I fear that all those things won't go far enough, fast enough in the first instance, and what we probably will experience is a number more years of some progress, and then government realising it's not gone far enough and having to go again and probably put more resource in various ways in, would be my estimation. But I think Norfolk is already trying to be leading edge at a lot of that vision, including on SRBs. So our SRB model I would want to advocate for quite strongly. I'm not saying it's perfect and every child's experience is uniformly positive, but actually I do think we've got a really good model there, and actually we're quite often now asked to work with other local authority areas who want to sort of learn from, and national government is paying attention to that. And one of the strengths of it is that more integrated approach. So the SRBs are very much intended to be an integral part of the mainstream schools to which they are attached. Obviously, a proportion of the time is spent in the units away from the main lessons, but the idea is very much that it is a mixed experience every single day, where children spend a part of their time integrated into the mainstream experience and a part of the time away or part of the week, and it evolves over time with a sort of phased plan towards reintegration. So they are not just small special schools on the side of a mainstream school with the children segregated off. We wouldn't approve a school to sponsor one if that's what their vision they set out was for it to be. Now, you may challenge me and say in a couple of cases that's not working as it should. I'm not suggesting every SRB is working perfectly, but the vision very much is an integrated part of the whole mainstream, not just a unit on the side that happens to be on the same side. They work symbiotically with the mainstream setup.
I'll just add to that as well, and this is borne out by some very strong evidence around the SRB programme through our annual review process, and we look at the totality of the programme and its impact on outcomes for children. What we really clearly see with the SRB programme is real support and enabling of children to develop independence, which then lends itself into that integration model that James described. So upon entry in primary, children may very well and do spend larger amounts of their time supported within the unit and the facility, probably less time kind of integrating with their mainstream peers. That's not to say that they are not included in whole school life. They absolutely are. And that will be, through interactions in the playground. They don't have separate playtimes or anything like that. But what we see is as children grow and reach into secondary, we see that the development around those children's levels of independence and I guess tolerance really of, particularly for children with more complex needs surrounding autism profiles particularly, start to really succeed and thrive in environments that perhaps would have been more challenging for them because they are developing those skills, and that can only be a good thing in terms of those children then being able to move into society at large, enter into employment, and into further education training as well. So I just wanted to add that point just because it does show the development of children through the overall programme also.
Thank you. I think, Councillor Webb, your point, you know, it sounds like they're going to have staff ready to hit the ground running, so important. I think the final person on my list before I come back to the portfolio holder is Councillor Smith-Clare, and I will make this the last point. Mike, please.
Thanks, Brian. I will keep this really short. It's just a pick-up from the points that you raised, James, and that was jigsaw analogy, which I think fits this perfectly, but also what Councillor Elmer said, and that was regards to some of the existing buildings that aren't suitable or are suitable for some of this future jigsaw piece. I think what I would find particularly useful would be to know what those buildings might be moving forward. They might be earmarked already, they might not be, but you mentioned very clearly that some aren't suitable, some might be. And I understand that it's got to be proximity and all those elements based. And I'm thinking we've had discussions time and time again about somewhere like Angel Road, but to have that clarity, I think moving forward would be really useful, particularly in us understanding this strategy as it rolls out.
I did hear the other day of a small village school just adjacent to my patch, which is a former school where they've merged two and moved into one. But the former school, I heard, was going to be a wedding venue, so you can get married in the old school. Which, if that you know floats your boat, that's that. But somebody obviously can see a business opportunity.
That's where the money
site,
is. You've got to
so
make
there
money.
we go.
It's all about profit, isn't it?
I mean, just for now, I guess potentially
Don't
when
make
we next
profit
bring
in
an item on
education.
SEND to this committee, which I think is on the forward plan, we could
Not
probably
they
cover
make
a bit of
profit in
detail
healthcare
on,
either,
you know,
but
there isn't that sort of black and white, this or this, but some sort of criterion around that we could do. Yeah.
we just
I think
don't
schools'
invest
estates are on for July.
in
So,
healthcare and
depending
education
on
in
what
this
the government
country.
does next
Not
week,
like
we
other
might all be
countries.
here, we might all not be. Councillor Carpenter, any final comments from yourself, please?
Well, thank you, Chairman. It's been great to be in the committee today to hear the views of members because we're all passionate.
Great to see some action.
I mean, Mike knows. We're all very passionate about children. But I just wanted to tell you a couple of little things whilst I've been sitting here thinking. In 2017, when I joined, I was made chairman of Children's Services, and we had a Children's Services Committee, and Mike was on it. I think Brian, you were on it as well, weren't you, at one point? Or whatever. I know we discussed it. In a dream, yeah, perhaps. But then, my view then was that I didn't want children travelling. This is 2017, and my passion is that children are kept within their own community. The issue with travelling, with children to travel in vehicles, going to school, is that they then don't engage. When they come to the end of their education and they go back to home or home area, who do they know? And I think for me, that is a point where they would need their support network of friends, and their friends are then scattered four corners of Norfolk because they went to a school in Norwich or whatever. But the parent, you know, their home's in Great Yarmouth. I live in Great Yarmouth, so I'll say Great Yarmouth. So for me, that is one of the critical factors for me for their young adulthood and the rest of their lives, that they do know their own local area because they spent a lot of their time travelling in vehicles. Last summer, I was on the A47 when there was quite a horrendous crash, and a big taxi from Great Yarmouth had followed me along the Acle Strait, and we were on the A47 together. And it was about 2 or 3 children in the back. We were stationary for 45 minutes, and this brings it home. We could not move, couldn't get out of the cars. We all had to move for emergency vehicles to come through the centre of a dual carriageway, which was difficult. And the children were getting restless after 45 minutes. I was in my car with my husband, and I said, I'm going to have to get out because I can see those children are... The vehicle was, you know, the children were not very happy being stuck in a vehicle. That brings it home to me what I've always... My vision for the children is to stay within in their location. So moving on to the point with SRBs, whilst we're talking, we're still building SRBs. And I visited a school in Yarmouth last Friday where over 30 languages are spoken. They have a nursery and they have a SEND provision there. They are so successful that they have moved children who are in that pod extension back into the mainstream school through tenacity, through how they manage the children. So those children started in the SEND provision and they're now in the mainstream school. There's all open corridors, all open classrooms, so the children all mix. So for me, that is quite a success for that school, bearing in mind there's so many barriers for children and teachers through language, but they mix. They all play together in the big playground and in the big garden they've got at the back there. So I've seen it in action and I can see that it does work. And obviously we have evidence and we're collating the evidence about that as well. But I'd just like to say thank you for the committee today. I can't tell you, I will have to make a decision on Monday. So, because we have to get it in before the date in February, early February, 24th or 27th? 27th of February that we need to get it in. So it's a single member decision and I will make the decision on Monday. But it's great to come to the committee today. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. We are asked to note and comment on the options provided by the DFE regarding the 2 new special free schools, which I think we've done. Consider and comment on the evidence base relating to the options, the impact and any conclusions therein, and make any recommendations to the Cabinet member as considered appropriate. I seem to feel that the committee, there is a consensus that we support the building of the 2 new schools. So from the chair, I will propose that we make that as a specific recommendation, that the committee supports the building of the 2 new schools. Presuming I can get a seconder. Yes, John. So I'll just have I think we'll actually have a show of hands on that, please, if we could. So that's unanimous, which is very helpful. And in terms of any recommendations, Penny, in terms of, obviously there was a consensus here from us. I think we need to explore how we can deliver the building of the schools, the actual physical structures, getting those built as quickly as is possible. And so I think that the route that we go in terms of that needs to be mindful of the outcome and delivery and working to a completion date. We don't want these things to be dragging on. We want them to be on the books and being useful to those children of the sort that you very much just mentioned, because they shouldn't be sat in buses at the end of the school day for umpteen hours. They need to be playing with the mates on the village green or having a kick about on the field with the football or whatever, and definitely not sat in transport more than is necessary. I mean, if that's helpful, obviously we would, we'll look to you to make that happen for us, please.
I will do, Chairman, and I can assure yourself and the committee I've already asked that question. How quickly can this be delivered? And James and everybody
Definitely.
else, sorting that out for me. I think what it's best, I would suggest that perhaps or we update members of this committee and other councillors with a briefing note, I think, or something like that, just to let you know where we are, what the position is, so you have like a running commentary on what's happening with these 2 schools.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. John, you want to?
Could I
pop your mic?
Sorry, Mike. Yeah. Could I suggest that we, as Cabinet member, that you also take this opportunity to confirm that we would like to do, or we see self-delivery as an option. I think following up the.
I'm not quite sure he's turned his microphone on.
The sooner we can get these schools built, we know we're 2 years behind what was the schedule of the previous government. So if self-delivery will produce a quicker result, can I suggest that we use your response to confirm that?
Well, I would want to expedite this as soon as possible, John. So I would want to expedite this as soon as possible, and that might probably be the route that we go through. But obviously, I can't tell you for certain. I'm sitting here today, but James will sort that out for me.
Excellent, thanks very much. Thank you everybody for your input, and thank you, Penny. Just to note, our next meeting date, not ominous at all, but it's Friday the 13th of March at 10 AM in here. So hopefully see you all safely then. And don't forget, of course, those that can, please can you join us next door, because we want to talk about our working group. Thank you.
Oh, right, there you go. That seems to be the end. Yes, it has finished. Oh, what did you all think about that then? I was making one or two little notes as we were going along, and questions actually. And this was one of them. How many special schools are there in Norfolk? And what brings up here is the specific number of these schools is not explicitly stated in the available resources. Unfortunately, Norfolk County Council provide a list of state-funded special schools, indicating that there are several options available for children with varying needs. Now, when I went on to ask more questions, which falls under, I believe, this page, finally recognise what SHIP stands for, Specialised Hubs of Inclusive Practice. That's what SHIP's meant. Children and young people enrol at a SHIP learning needs alongside others which have been identified. They will typically fit in the following profile. Identify learning needs requiring support to access mainstream curricula, I can't say that, if they can do so. Display traits akin to a neurodiverse profile of needs. Have secondary needs such as speech, language and communication. Specific learning difficulty, physical, medical, sensory, social, emotional and mental health. And where it actually got down to a little nitty gritty was the locations of these places. So foundation stage, reception to year 2. So we have one in Durham, one in Norwich, one in Thetford. And then in stage 2, years 3 to 6, we have Diss, Thetford, Norwich, another Norwich one, and another Norwich one being Sprowston, Falcon and Lionwood Junior. So they are the only ones that I can actually find. If there's private ones, they are certainly not listed that I can find out. But yeah, these are the state ones that are out there. I would have thought there would be more in Yarmouth, considering that they've talked about Yarmouth, and that not being the case. But yes, what I will do is I will share that link as well, if it's useful for anybody. I'll share it just in the comment section right there. And that's where I'm going to leave it for today. So thanks for watching. Please like, please subscribe, please hit that notification bell, because that's what I do with these other meetings. When they come up, I have my notifications on, so I can try and watch them as near damn it to live. I mean, we were running about 20 minutes behind, but that's a good thing about YouTube. We can start at the beginning while it's running live in the background, and even when it's finished, we can continue until it finishes on my screen. So yes, I will keep an eye out to when the next district meeting is and the county meeting, because I am finding them quite interesting. Some of them are quite boring, but some of them are quite interesting. So in the meantime, like I say, please like, please subscribe and hit the notification. And let's see where all this takes us within our North Norfolk and Norfolk County Council agendas. In the meantime, thanks for watching and see you later.